what is clear is that each of the deals that have been struck so far have involved President Trump being directly engaged.
There are so many areas where the US and India could work to increase trade.
Hello and welcome to this special episode of Tracking Trump on deKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Well, we've seen quite an amazing 48 hours or so as far as India-US ties are concerned, with President Trump having a rather unusual outburst about the relationship with India. First, he has imposed 25% tariffs, which are in the sort of higher bracket as far as his tariffs on countries around the world are concerned. He's also threatened unspecified penalties against India for doing trade with Russia, and then goes on to describe the Indian economy as a dead economy. Now, all of this has not gone down well in New Delhi, although the Ministry of External Affairs today gave a very measured public statement saying that India and the US in their relationship had weathered many challenges and that they were confident that the relationship would continue to grow. At the same time, the Commerce Ministry has said that in its trade negotiations with the US, it will keep India's national interest at heart. So there's been no sort of knee-jerk, harsh reaction from New Delhi, but there is increasing political pressure, certainly on Mr. Modi, to take a public stand against the US president. We have described this as a relationship where two friends essentially were in ties together. Donald Trump and Mr. Modi often describing each other as friends. So what went wrong? What is the way forward for India? And is this really a new low point in India-US relationship? I'm happy to welcome Mr. Mark Linscott to the program today. He's a senior advisor with the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum and who was also the former assistant US trade representative. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Mr. Linscott, thank you for joining us. Can I ask you first, how much of a setback is this for the India-US relationship as a whole? The public statements of India at the moment notwithstanding, were you taken aback by the harsh tone of the president?
I think it is a bit of a setback, hopefully only a temporary one, and I was taken aback. I think that's the appropriate way to characterize it. In fact, I was on my way to the airport on Wednesday morning when I saw the post on Truth Social, and I was very surprised, particularly given its tone and specifically the reference to purchases of Russian oil and his expectation to apply some penalty associated with that. I was very surprised.
In fact, that stood out for me as well. I having covered this relationship for some decades now, the fact is that I think a lot of people in India saw his threat of tariffs as a negotiating tactic, as he's done with other countries. But the reference to Russia seemed to be, in a way, threatening India to make a geopolitical choice, and therefore escalated this to a different level.
Yeah, and I think that could be the case. What we saw then last night here in the United States was his release of the executive order, and we have a 25% tariff on India. That was expected, but there were no further references to to penalties associated with purchases from Russia. No additional tariff associated with BRICS members. So perhaps it was more rhetorical. Hopefully that's the case, and we won't see additional tariffs.
Well, I mean, the problem is the uncertainty of it all, isn't it? We really don't know what's going to happen, and I'll come to that question as well in a moment. But what do you think prompted this outburst? Was it just frustration with the way the India-US talks on the trade deal were going, which seemed to be stuck at this point about opening up Indian agriculture and dairy to American products? Or do you think it was something to do with the fact that India is not accepting Mr. Trump's repeated assertions that he brokered a ceasefire between India and Pakistan?
I expect it's a combination of factors, and it's very difficult to, provide an assessment of what's happening in the president's head and what prompts him to make such outbursts, specifically targeted at India. I'm not so sure that these agriculture issues that have been highlighted repeatedly in the Indian press are, the central issue that has led to the current situation with the reciprocal tariff. I think the two sides worked very hard to come to terms over the last few months. I think they've been very close. What is clear is that each of the deals that have been struck so far have involved President Trump being directly engaged. He is the trade negotiator in chief for the United States in this administration. Every deal has involved his imprint at the last moments, and that opportunity was not presented with India. I think if there had been perhaps a call, a conversation between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump last week, we may not have seen those posts from the president on Truth Social.
It's interesting you say that. In other words, he needs some kind of validation of his ego. Is that it? I mean, he likes to be thanked all the time. We know that, and he wants the Nobel Peace Prize. But are you saying that a personal intervention by Prime Minister Modi on the trade negotiations in particular would probably have averted this?
I think it would have made a difference. Every single deal, he's either had a direct conversation with the foreign leader, or he has brought their trade ministers in Washington into his office to finalize the deal. So I think that would have made a significant difference. He wants to make the final decision. He's got that authority to make the final decision, and that is with respect to concluding these special trade deals.
And how difficult do you think this development of the past few days is going to make the actual negotiations? Will this make things much tougher for the negotiators on both sides? Because again, the Indian press has been given the impression that we may have had a kind of an interim deal in a month or so, but this has just pushed the timelines much further down the road.
That may be the case. It's really hard to say at this point in time. I think in some respects the executive order was restrained. A 25% tariff for India, which is not a lot higher than some of the other tariffs that were applied, even for those countries with trade deals. So Vietnam at a 20% versus India at a 25%. I think it was important that there were no penalties, additional tariffs imposed in response to India's relationship with Russia. So, I could imagine things changing next week if there were that kind of communication, that leader level communication. We could see a very different situation. I mean, the president has shown that he can reverse course. He can turn on a dime and go from criticizing a foreign leader to next week embracing that leader. So things can change quickly in this administration.
But can I ask you, from the American point of view, where are the trade negotiations actually stuck? You rightly said that in the Indian press, the agriculture angle of it is being played up quite a bit. We are being told that that is where it's largely stuck, and it is a huge political issue in India, because any government that opens up Indian agriculture to the US or any other country will, face a political backlash back home. There is a big vote bank to look at. But from the American point of view, then where is it stuck?
Well, there clearly has been a lot of progress in the negotiations over the last few months, and there are certainly sensitive issues on both sides and challenges on both sides. The larger aspiration is for a bilateral trade agreement, and that will take a lot more time to negotiate, something that's comprehensive. This is unique in this administration with India to have that objective, as committed to in February when Prime Minister Modi was here. So, I'm not so sure that the negotiations are stuck. I think they just did not advance to the next level with an immediate trade deal. And I think that lack of leader level communication was a key factor. I think that the two sides can get back together in coming weeks. There have been reports of a USTR delegation planning to come to India in late August to continue negotiations. So I do think things can get back on track. This should only be a momentary setback.
One of India's former foreign secretaries put out a very interesting tweet when this happened, and she said that diplomacy is also based on mutual respect. And while you said perhaps a call from Mr. Modi might have prevented an outburst like this, is this not a moment of reflection in the White House that perhaps behaving like a schoolyard bully may not always go your way? I mean, the words he used about the Indian economy, the fact that he rubbed it in with a deal with Pakistan to develop its oil reserves, and then said that, well, maybe one day Pakistan will sell oil to India. It seemed very deliberately, to provoke India to get under India's skin. And surely he knows that is something that would rankle New Delhi. So, I mean, is there no responsibility that he has at all? His advice, does anyone advise him? Does he listen to anybody around him?
Well, it's clear this is the character of the president. This is an attribute of this administration. That's not going to change. We'll have 4 years of this kind of administration. It's all about direct talk. It's a lot about confronting foreign partners in very direct ways. That should come as no surprise. I don't think anything is shocking at this point in time. So to counsel or expect a different kind of diplomacy from this administration, I think would be unrealistic. And I think looking forward, that has to be anticipated, and in some respects that has to be accommodated. And I think both sides still have tremendous scope to come together. There are so many shared interests. There is a long history of very warm relations, and I'm hopeful that will happen in the future.
All right, Mr. Linscott, thank you very much for joining us on deKoder today and giving us some perspective from the American side on what's happening. We do hope those differences are resolved sooner rather than later. Thank you very much. And joining us now on deKoder is Meera Shankar, India's former ambassador to the United States. Ma'am, we were just, talking to Mark Linscott, who's been the US trade representative. And, from his point of view, this is a setback in the relationship, but he still believes that a trade deal between India and the US can be salvaged. But before I come to that, how much of a setback has the last 2 days been for the relationship, which you yourself have so closely nurtured and fostered as ambassador?
Look, we've been through difficult times with the US, and in recent years, the strategic direction of the relationship has always been to try to work around problems and to move ahead. So I would imagine that that would be the case now, that both sides will try to pick up the pieces and continue discussions. I think for India, it's important not to react emotionally because, the realities of the global economy and India's global trade remain the same as they were last month. That is, the US is the largest economy in the world. They are our largest trading partner. They are our largest export market. So these realities don't change. Now, on the other hand, we have economic, political, and social compulsions in India in opening up sectors which are sensitive because the livelihoods of so many farmers, 50% of our population, depends on agriculture. And these are subsistence farmers. They can't really compete with the mega corporations of the US. So opening up could lead to serious turmoil economic and political in the Indian system. So I think it would be very difficult for any government to accept that. Now, having said that, there are so many areas where the US and India could work to increase trade. For instance, in high technology items, in defense technologies, in the energy sector. These are all sectors, in the aeronautical sector, in space. These are all sectors where India
It's
would
doable.
look at buying more things from the US. So I think the basic thing is that the two negotiating teams have to focus on what are the areas where there could be potential meeting points and respect each other's red lines. I think for
Can
the
I
US,
ask you, why do
sorry.
you think Trump had outburst? I mean, we know that a part of his nature is to be a bully. I mean, he is a bully, let's face it. But, this kind of what seemed to be a very personal outburst. It's, talking about India's relationship with Russia, describing India's economy as a dead economy, the references to Pakistan. Mark Linscott seems to believe that if Mr. Modi had picked up the phone last week and directly spoken to Mr. Trump about the trade deal, that maybe this wouldn't have happened. But my question is that, do you share that assessment? And should the onus have to be on India? And at what point do we actually stand up to a bully and say we're not going to take this? Because we also, I mean, we are a big power, we are an emerging power. So how long do you just sort of sit back and take it?
Well, I think that Trump's outburst has been motivated by two things. One is with India saying agriculture is a red line we can't open, dairy is a red line we can't open. And he has been talking about this for quite some time, that India has 39% tariff weighted average on agricultural imports, US has 5%, so there's a huge, asymmetry and so on. But the point is, India really is not looking at buying agricultural products. There are certain products that we do buy, and there's scope to buy more. For instance, edible oils. They are our third largest import after petroleum and fertilizers. I think edible oils sometimes are our second largest or third largest imports. Then there are dried fruits which we buy from California farmers. And if you look at the deals that Trump has done, let's say with the EU or with Japan, I don't think either of them has opened up agriculture across the board. Japan has agreed to buy more rice, has agreed to open up rice imports, but they import rice in any case. And the second is that they have agreed to open up automobile imports into Japan. EU has not opened up its restrictions on genetically modified organizations, but it has some little easing on new technologies for modification.
But do you think the phone call from Mr. Modi would have made a difference?
I am not so sure at this juncture. But yes, I think given the fact that Trump's decisions are individualistic, that no one else in his administration is authorized to take decisions, that, a call with Trump may have been good, but it can also, backfire if he decides to shoot, the way he sometimes is prone to.
But
So that's
I feel that Mr. Modi is in a difficult position because, as you know, Mr. Trump has been repeatedly. I think people have counted anywhere between 26 to 30 times asserted that he was responsible for bringing out about a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Now, the Prime Minister's on the floor of Parliament now said that that's not the case. Could that have been a trigger, you think, for this particularly harsh outburst as well? The fact that he was contradicted like so publicly on the floor of
I
India's parliament.
I think that, we have perhaps needled him a bit unnecessarily on this issue because it's not a make or break issue for India. After all, India was wanting a ceasefire. We didn't want an all out war. That was what we conveyed through our signaling and our messaging, that we were retaliating against the terrorists. We were not targeting military targets. And therefore, we could have handled it a bit differently, saying, Trump played a helpful role in persuading Pakistan to see reason. He may not have persuaded us because we were already persuaded to start with, but he may have played a role in terms of talking to Pakistan. So there would have been no harm in saying this. It would not have contradicted the fact that there was no mediation, but it would have given him some credit. I would not have made, kind of called him out in public for his statements. But since then, he's still been talking about a good trade deal with India and so on. Several times he's made statements. So I think some of it is cumulative and some of it is his frustration with the way the Russian negotiations are going, on Ukraine, where he had promised a ceasefire within 24 hours, and Putin is proving a harder nut to crack. So there are pressures within the US system, hardline Republicans like Lindsey Graham and others who say, countries like India and China and others who purchase Russian oil should be targeted with secondary sanctions, so that then the economic purchases which fuel Russia's war are staunched. So he's responding in part to that. But if you look at this, then China is the biggest importer of Russian energy, gas, oil, what have you. And there the negotiations are still going on.
Well, I think we have a lot of interesting days and weeks ahead. We don't know what the penalties on India will be for its trade with Russia. That has been unspecified. We don't know whether they will happen. If they happen, what form they'll take. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. Meanwhile, the trade negotiations go on. Ambassador Meera Shankar, thank you very much for joining us and giving us some perspective on this important developing story. Thank you. And that's it on the show this week. We'll have much more on the fallout of Trump's tariffs, particularly on India, in our next episode. Do join us then.